Okay,
Buenas tardes a todas y a todos en España y América Latina. Por favor, pongan en el chat, write on the chat, where are you coming from? Pongan en el chat desde dónde se conectan. Please, yes. Tienen servicio de traducción simultánea al español. En el icono con la forma del mundo, escoger español. Muy bien. More people coming in. Uruguay, Madrid. Muy bien. México, Querétaro, Buenos Aires. España. Muy bien. ¿Qué lugar de España? Muy bien. Ecuador. Germany. Willkommen. Welcome. Set your translation button to English if you want to listen in English or to Spanish. Great. More people. Great. I love it. So be most welcome to this 1 hour conversation with Dr. Shari Geller, PhD, clinical psychologist from Canada. And I'm going to first introduce her for all of us and to any one of you who are new to Shari. And after introducing Shari, I'm going to be interviewing her and asking some questions that may help us understand her work with a little bit more depth. And after this conversation with her, I'm gonna ask her if she will guide us through an experience, an experiential. And maybe if there's time, maybe we can take some questions. Okay, is everybody just listening okay in Spanish with the translation and in English? Just type something for me. Okay, great. I love those fingers. So, welcome everybody. My name is Enrique. I'm your host at Four Cycles Institute in Barcelona. And I'm so pleased to have Shari Geller with us. Shari Geller is a PhD and clinical psychologist, an author, certified mindful self-compassion teacher, and she offers training modules in therapeutic presence all around the world. And she holds a vision of having presence to be a foundational training for all of us who are in the work of psychotherapy. Shari co-authored the book Therapeutic Presence, a mindful approach to effective therapeutic relationships, now in its 2nd edition with Leslie Greenberg. And she also has a book called A Practical Guide for Cultivating Therapeutic Presence, where she offers hands-on tools and guidance for cultivating and strengthening presence for therapists. She's a co-editor of a new book called Self-Compassion in Psychotherapy, a clinical handbook. Shari is also part of the core faculty of the Self-Compassion in Psychotherapy certificate program and is a member of the networking committee chair for the International Society for Emotional Focused Therapy. Shari is co-director of the Center for Mind-Body Health in Toronto, which I had the pleasure to see. It's a very beautiful center, where she offers training, supervision, and therapy in emotion-focused therapy, mindfulness, and self-compassion modalities for individuals and couples. Wow. And I hope that we're going to be able to publish her book into Spanish soon, maybe 1 year from now. So that's my wish. And I hope to receive her blessing and your blessing so we can carry
that would be an honor.
Yeah, thank you so much. So Shari, welcome so much. Thank you for being here with us right at the beginning of 2024. And I would like to ask, how did you start to research and get interested in studying presence?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say it's an honor to be here, Enrique, with you, with your community. It's just so wonderful. And I love Spain. So, Spanish community and culture is so close to my heart. I have some dear friends in Valencia. But in terms of the work of presence and kind of how it all began, I mean, like all of our work, I think it started with some personal seeds that were planted, coming from I'm going to give the short story because for the sake of time, I can give a longer story a different time if we meet for the when we meet for the workshop. But basically coming from a lot of complicated family relationships and my mother dying when I was young. Before she died, there was a lot of difficulty in our relationship. So it was a very complicated grieving process. And when she died, I had a lot of, she had a headache that spread that was a brain tumor. And it was from a lung tumor that spread to the brain. But because this kind of headache going to brain tumor, it sent off a lot of anxiety symptoms as a young person for me. I had a sore throat, maybe I have throat cancer, complied with everything. So then I went to, eventually, after many visits to the hospital, I finally went to see an emotion doctor, which is all they could say instead of psychologist or psychiatrist at the time. And this person was sort of a detached presence. He was kind of scribbling on a notebook, not really very present. Um, I felt very kind of confused and alone in that therapy room. But I'm persistent, so I stayed with it. And then it was the day his eyes nodded and he fell asleep that I decided to leave that therapy relationship. And I left feeling more alone and more confused about my issues and jump forward, half a year, 8 months. And I met another therapist who was completely different. I began that therapy relationship as a client, and she was, without understanding the word then, very present, knew what I was experiencing before I knew it. She was very attuned, created a lot of safety, and allowed me to not only work through the grief, but complicated grieving, and inspired a lot of interest in me in this missing ingredient in therapy. And then jumping forward into my graduate program, working with Leslie Greenberg in motion focused therapy, I approached him about my deep interest in understanding and exploring this really core quality in therapy. And so that began a lot of different research, which I can talk about in a few moments, and research studies too, and training programs. Jump forward, over 30 years later, training programs for therapists in this seems very simple, but very complicated and subtle experience of presence in the therapy relationship.
So it's remarkable that you have been guiding yourself from your innermost self to assess what was not right with the first therapist and what was exactly right for your system with the second therapy, and that you gave it a lot of thought and reflection, and you pulled that string for your own work. And after you've done all this emotion and mindfulness and awareness piece, what would you say are the basic elements of presence? From how did your model emerge as an empirically supported model?
Yes, it's a great question. I mean, a lot of the model emerged originally from some of my early research, where I did a major qualitative study and interviewed master therapists on who had either written about presence or were highly regarded on their mastery in therapeutic skills and relationship both, and interviewed them. And then, as qualitative research goes, you have a stack of things that you have to work through and generate out a model. And from there, we then developed a psychotherapy research measure of presence, of therapists and clients' experience of therapist presence, so that we could study it more intensely, which has, been studied a lot since then. So some of the core elements come from there, and we found kind of three overarching qualities. One is that therapists talked about presence being very embodied, and that includes being kind of grounded in myself, really immersed in the moment with my client's experience, with this larger backdrop of spaciousness and expansion, and always guided by compassion or being with and for the client in service of their healing. So it's a very embodied quality. And then there was this second overarching element called the process of presence, kind of what happens when we're in the therapy room with clients. And that involves being very receptively attuned. So I'm cleared out in my own body, but I'm also receptively taking in clients' experience in my own self. That mixes internally with what I know about this person, what I know about psychotherapy research, about their whole case formulation with their
Wow.
goals of therapy. And the moment kind of intermingles with all this. I'm in contact with my own experience, and then bringing that to be in contact with my client's experience in the form of just relational contact, or it might be an empathic gesture or an intervention, depending on my approach, that is meeting the moment of where my client is. And then this third overarching quality that therapists talked about was the intention for presence. That, therapists talked about, not only do they commit their own lives to some kind of personal practice, whether it be a formal mindfulness practice or an informal, how I am in my relationships, to my self-care, all of these kinds of things. But there's also, in prior to the therapy room and entering into the therapeutic relationship itself and in the room, a real intention to bring presence into the relationship.
Wow.
And if I can add one more component, because
Sure.
how I understood it in my earlier studies and years and training was, it's this component that's within self that I'm bringing with the other, but it's actually a very relational quality. And we've found that, there's this other component, which is it's relational, that as I'm present, my client is feeling safe, almost like I did with this early second therapist I went through. That allows them to open up further in therapy. There's safety within me as a therapist. And then there's this bi-directional connection and attunement that happens through the relationship, where something, very not only bigger, and I want to say even magical, mystical, can happen in our connection, but actually even more scientific. It actually allows, whether it's mirror neurons or adaptive oscillators, allows us to be connected in a way where I can get a felt sense of the other's experience. And the intervention that is, or response that is offered, is tuned in with what's needed in the moment.
So let me just recap. This is amazing. So you are embodied. You really work to be in your body and to feel from inside, interoception, proprioception, and all that. And then you also do some, like, become a container, like a sacred vessel, where your perceptions, your felt sense, your knowledge just comes into that place in you. And then right after that, you go into the relatedness aspect with the other, right? Or I'm missing one step, something. Yeah.
Well, no, you're not, but it's also that I'm in contact with not just the client, but with myself. And that's
Exactly.
a very important element that sometimes is often missing in psychotherapy training. We learn what to do with the client, but not necessarily how to use ourselves as a tool or an antenna, or a way of being able to read what's happening in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And I also know from martial arts, from my own practice of martial arts in the past, the when you talk about of intention, setting up the intentions for presence is something very deep, I assume.
Mhm.
Could you talk about that? What, how's that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it really involves these different elements. Again, how I'm committed in my own day-to-day life to self-care, to that kind of quality. But in the therapy room, when I practice presence outside of the therapy room, and there's lots of practices and things that we offer to people, but people have their own experiences like martial arts and ways that you do that,
Yeah.
that there is through repetition of these experiences, the brain can access it more easily when we're in the room with clients. So when I call on a practice or I call on my intention, it calls on the experience, which, neuroscience is showing a lot that experience imprints in the brain and creates new neural pathways that then allows experiences to be accessed and opened up. And, by bringing myself into that experience and then meeting the client, as opposed to finishing my email and then needing small things, but big impact. There was some research done where they had, different therapists, some practice kind of a presence practice before they walk in the room for 5 minutes, another group not. And the difference with that kind of intentionality and bringing oneself in had such a large impact on the therapeutic alliance, which we know leads to strong psychotherapy outcome, but also on the outcome of sessions themselves. So, to practice outside of the room, to bring myself into that state in the room, and to bring myself back over and over in relationship, because there are a lot of challenges to presence, a lot of things that throw us out of the moment, and to be able to return again and again and again is very powerful.
Mhm, mhm. What would be the benefits of practicing therapeutic presence, Shari?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is to create these new neural pathways within our own self that allow us to come into relationship and access these qualities that are much more available when we have that kind of experience outside of the room. Also, because there are so many things that can throw us, being in these deep moments of connection are not always there and nor necessary, but there are times when we get really thrown, whether it be we're all going through a pandemic together and I'm as triggered, as my client is around their experience, or they talk about a deep grief that I'm just at the anniversary of some kind of deep loss, and or they have some kind of reactivity in their own system that sets off a reactivity in my system. There's some, or they're cut off in some way that then I feel disconnected. There's so many things to pay attention to, and to have that fine-tuned kind of, you said before, interoception, sensing my own self, but also exteroception, sensing the client's self, that then I can alter the moment, alter how I respond to the moment. Because maybe I'm doing this intervention and I'm doing, I'm an emotion focused therapist, so I'm doing an empty chair work, or I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist and I'm doing some kind of thought record. But the client has kind of left the moment a little bit. And there's big ways clients show us, but there's subtle ways, their face, eyes glaze over, voice tone, things to pay attention to. And I want to pause, I want notice, pardon me, notice these things, to pause to them, bring us back into safety, and then continue on what we're doing at the right moment, as opposed to I keep going because I think I should. So the practices allow for that level of subtle and moment to moment kind of attunement that's really important in effective therapy.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. And are there any practices that you would like to mention now? Maybe, or we would save them for the workshop. But I know
I
this is
mean, we have a
there.
lot of in our recent, sorry, Enrique, I think I cut you off there.
No, no worries. It's fine. In the research.
Yeah, in the recent book, the second edition of the Therapeutic Presence and Mindful Approach to Effective Therapeutic Relationships, we've renamed it. We added 2 chapters on training, and we created a training program because I do a lot of training with therapists, and then another chapter just on all the practices. So there are numerous, is my point, but there are some fine-tuned ones around grounding and really cultivating that quality or cultivating a sense of immersion or expansion or compassion. There are a lot of practices for attunement, how do I, or even the flexibility, the mental flexibility to keep shifting my awareness between client, between myself, between the relationship, between that access is kind of a flexibility of awareness really important. Um, and you mentioned before that I'm a certified mindful self-compassion teacher. And I think self-compassion practices have informed my work a lot as well over these last years. One is compassion is a deep quality of therapeutic presence, but also working with compassion practices and self-compassion are really critical in working with some of the challenges to presence.
Yeah. As you speak, I am having an experience.
I'd love to hear that.
I'm having a visual of, the Japanese art of Ikebana.
Say
Like,
more about it. The
yeah, they were like set a flower arrangement,
Yes.
and they pick exactly a special kind of flower, a special kind of herb, really from a mindfulness inner place, and the cumulative effect of following that piece by piece, quality by quality, nuances of very fine qualities of human being that you can offer to a person, then it results in a masterful bouquet of flowers. That's Japanese art of Ikebana, like that's like a mindfulness practice. So when you were saying about all these qualities that you can practice and bring into your clients, I thought, wow, this is so very rich. It really transforms our practice into a gift, into a blessing, into something of a new experience. So that's how I was impacted by you sharing about.
What a beautiful image.
Yeah.
And, even when you were sharing that, I was thinking of, it touched in me this flower by flower. You're just focusing on the one until you have this bouquet. And I think practice is like that. Like it's not about I'm committing 3 hours a day to it's one step at a time. And, I think about, let's say I decided I'm in Toronto, I'm gonna walk to Florida. I got my direction, I'm gonna do it now. And that's pretty south. It takes me a few months. Who knows how long it takes? I'm not sure because I haven't done the walk yet. But, if I instead at the place I'm at now, turn my direction a quarter of an inch or a half an inch, I will end up in Texas. I will end up somewhere very different in 3 months. And so it's only just kind of a small step at a time to commit to that kind of subtle awareness in our own experience and mindful care, or otherwise that can actually have an effect down the road that's quite powerful.
Wow. Amazing. So just to continue, what are some of the misconceptions people have or the practitioners have around therapeutic presence? Well, what comes?
Presence is easy. We just do it. I'm present already. I know what that is, right? Before I say other misconceptions, I'm gonna just share a little bit about some of our early research that we had therapists in some of the research tool I mentioned in larger psychotherapy research studies rate their presence and look at the relationship to outcome and to the alliance and various other factors. And what we found initially was that therapists who self-rated themselves as present or not didn't necessarily predict the alliance or outcome, but clients who rated their therapist as present or not did. And so we got curious, like, what is it? Why are these therapists who self-rating? And we did more analysis on everything. And we found, because there was a real mix between newer therapists and more experienced therapists, and we found that the newer therapists all rated themselves as I'm present, I'm present, I'm present, because they didn't understand all the subtle qualities of what it means to bring ourselves into that level of relationship with the other. And more experienced therapists had more knowledge or wisdom around the subtleties of that experience. So that would be one misconception. Another is that presence is the same as empathy, and that's a strong one, even in my own community in emotion focused therapy. And they're related, but they're different. And first of all, our research has shown, we have studied, rating presence and rating empathy, and we found that they're not only distinct from each other, but presence predicts empathy. So empathy, being able to really understand and be in the shoes of the other, as Carl Rogers would say, we can't be empathic until we're present first. We can be present without being empathic, but we can't be empathic without being present. So, Carl Rogers, for much of his life, talked about the three conditions that are created to be able to create the conditions for healing and change in our clients: empathy and congruence and unconditional positive regard. And near the end of his life, he started to talk about maybe there's this other quality that's at the edges of these three conditions, which he started to say is presence. And so it is something that kind of underlies these conditions and is predictive of, but it's not the same. And I guess another misconception would be that presence is the same as mindfulness, right? And they're different. And, some people might disagree, and that's okay. There are different ways to be able to do that. Mindfulness, I see, as kind of a practice of bringing our attention to the moment with intention on purpose. Whereas presence is a state of being, and it's a relational state of being. So mindfulness practice might help us to cultivate that quality, but it's not exactly the same. And then, a couple more. I mean, one is that presence, I said it early, that it just happens inside the therapist, but it is actually kind of a relational experience, that particular therapeutic presence. It's a relational experience that happens between therapist and client. And, maybe another misconception is that all we need to do is be present. That's enough, and change will happen. I don't know if that's true, and I'm not sure if that is where I come from with all of this. What I see is presence is a foundational way of bringing ourselves into the therapy that allows our approach, our responses, our interventions to be that much more effective, because they're attuned to the moment, because I'm working within myself, because I'm reading what's happening with the client, because I'm holding their whole story and their experience and the whole of psychotherapy research, and letting it be guided by what's happening moment to moment in my attunement with clients. So I always say to supervisees, learn all you can about your interventions in depth, practice them, and let it go when you enter the therapy room. And through being with the client and your therapeutic goals, that the right way of approaching that's most fitting and resonance with clients and with the moment will emerge.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And you also talk about barriers to presence, and this will be addressed in the workshop. Will it? Or I don't know. Yeah. What would be a barrier to being present?
I mean, I think they happen for all of us often. So let's just normalize that. I think one of them is, as I said before, maybe some countertransference. We're triggered with something that our clients are experiencing, or in the dynamic in the therapeutic relationship and in the style of my client, it's bringing out something that is, reactive or triggering for me. Maybe it is feeling shut down in the moment, feeling bored, feeling tired, feeling there's a rupture between my client and I, a therapeutic alliance rupture, relationship rupture, or perhaps, there's natural distraction, or there's because we're so interconnected, we know from neuroscience, there's this kind of bi-directional attunement between clients and myself that I am picking up things in my nervous system that actually are important and informational, but they might feel like a reaction, and not being able to have the subtle ability to discern, or the awareness, self-embodied self-awareness to discern what's a reaction, what is interpersonally informational, what is, the fact that I've left the moment in some way. All of these kinds of things can come up and take us, and probably many more that people can name in the moment can come up and take us out of the moment.
Yeah, beautiful, excellent. Yeah, I think we all go through all those.
Yes, exactly.
I was thinking this client, that client, this happened to me the other day with that client. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And I have one more question, or maybe two, but one would be, there is like an interaction in your work with polyvagal theory. Is that okay to talk about this? How
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
apply polyvagal theory to therapeutic presence model or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, I found it very powerful. I know there's a lot of controversy people say around polyvagal and Steve Porges' work, and yet it's so powerful. He's had some amazing responses to some of that controversy. But even if we see it as a descriptive kind of experience, you know, early on, I've been studying presence, let's say for 15, 20 years, 15 years, I think at this 20 years at this point, and I sit in a workshop and Steve Porges is leading something, and I'm listening to him talk about polyvagal theory, and everything went off in my brain that said this is explaining the neuromechanisms around how presence brings change. So we know with polyvagal theory that there is a nervous system, first of all, that is bidirectionally it impacted. My brain impacts my body impacts my brain, but there's also a relational bidirectional attunement. So we are reading each other's nervous systems and impacted by each other's nervous systems all the time. And Steve talks about this neuroception of safety, that we read when there's safety and when there's unsafety, but oftentimes with people with trauma, they read unsafety even when it's a safe moment or safe relationship. So what I found is, as I delved into this more, and I approached Steve at that time, and we talked about writing a paper together, which we did, and we've done some work together since, because his work at that point wasn't as much in the clinical world, and for me, it was such an amazing explanation of some of the neural mechanisms. But I think one of the biggest one, if you could sum it up, is that presence evokes safety. So if I'm bringing presence into the room, it evokes a sense of safety in my client and in myself that allows for deeper psychotherapeutic work. But more than that, also is like it allows me to read the nervous system, the other, through my own nervous system. So maybe I can link this to the barriers question. If I'm a bit closed down or tired, it might not be that I'm just closed down, but I'm reading my client's nervous system, where they are emotionally closed, and I'm picking it up, and it's coming in the relationship. And when I can have that kind of subtle awareness, it might be, okay, slow down, check in with my client, check in with myself to bring myself back into the moment, check in with my client on what's happening, and then use the relational connection or long exhalations together, or even walk around the room together, or some kind of polyvagal practice to be able to bring safety back into the room and into the moment, so then they can do the deeper work of therapy. So it's
Mhm.
very informative. I feel like it really,
Yeah,
we have short time together, so I'm giving you the, like, we
I
used to call
know.
it, when I grew up, the Coles notes, like the little bullets around some of this stuff, but it's actually quite powerful.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that connection and how it fits in, because here in this institute we have promoted a lot of polyvagal, and we still do, and we'd like to support that, and how this model, because we're interested in how psychotherapy develops, but we also take in the neurobehavioral parts the neurobehavioral science that's emerging from neuroscience, from all this work. So it's very interesting to me, at least, and to
Yeah.
most of the people who come to this institute are also interested in bottom-up approaches and relational approaches that include emotion awareness and a deep work like the one that you offer. So how do you feel, Shari, so far? Would you like us to invite people with questions like for 10 minutes and then wrap with the practice, or do
Sure.
the practice first and then take some questions? How would
I'm
that?
very open, whatever you feel, however you want to guide this.
My sense is that we need to take like some questions,
Okay.
like for 10 minutes, if the people have questions, and if not, we go for the experiential.
Okay, sounds good.
So I'm gonna ask the people in the audience, if you have questions, press the reaction button. And so this will put you before me, so I can know you're there, that you have a question that you want to address. Okay, so I'm gonna add you, and Shari is gonna be translated, okay? So there you go. Okay. Let me remove myself and then have your question.
I see Sylvina has raised their hand.
Yes, Silvina, you can unmute yourself.
Can she be, are you okay with being on with me?
Silvina, you like to unmute or talk? Are you there? Or it seems like a picture.
Oh, she can't unmute, she said.
Okay, so
Just asked him to unmute. Try it now, Sylvina, see if you can.
yeah. Okay. Oh, so you want to type your question? I don't know what's going on. So try to come out and come back in, and we take the next person, Silvina. Try to come out and come back in, okay? Okay, so Maria, we're gonna have you. Yes, puedes hablar.
Hi.
Hi.
Can
Español o
I
en
speak in
inglés.
English?
Yes,
Okay.
lo que tú
Hi,
quieras.
can I speak English? Maybe, or do you prefer me to
Yes.
speak in Spanish?
Yes, and they will translate it to
Hi,
Spanish.
Shari.
Hi, Maria.
So nice to meet you. I'm
You
so
too.
inspired by you. I
Oh,
am currently working on my thesis. I'm an art therapist, and then I am studying silence in these processes like therapeutic and also, well, teaching through the arts with children and adolescents. And I found, like, in a previous research I conducted for my master's degree, that I think silence and presence are deeply connected. And well, I would love to read your books, and if there are any other papers that you can give us the references, I really would love to read it. And then if I could, well, interview you later on for my study, that would be great too. So thank you, because everything you are like talking about is like food for my
it speaks
investigation as
deeply
well.
to you.
So
Yeah, okay.
thank
Well,
you very
wonderful
much.
that you're doing, what is the specific aspect of the dissertation? Is it on presence with
Ah,
in art therapy or?
yes, well, it's about like dimensions of silence. And then, well, my previous study was conducted by consulting experts in the field, because there were a few studies in Israel about like silence in art therapy, but I couldn't find much more. And then,
Right.
well, I started like just getting, well, it was a grounded theory study with the data that I got, and then I established some
Great,
domains,
wonderful.
and well, I created the theory. But then the thing is silence, and at first it's just dimensions of silence. What are we talking about? And then we are talking about nonverbal kind of silence, and then all the manifestations
Beautiful.
that can be like
Very
anything. And then after that, can it be a resource? And then how do I feel and how do I relate with silence during the sessions and working
right.
with children, adolescents through the arts, like in the
Wonderful.
psychotherapeutic, yes,
Thank you,
context. So
Maria. Where are you from, Maria?
that's,
Where are you
sorry.
from? Where are you from, Maria?
Madrid, Spain.
Madrid.
Madrid.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
from Spain. I'm from Madrid.
I just
Yes.
posted the link for you to go to watch Shari's publications. Thank you so much.
Yes, and they're all downloadable, Maria, so you should be able to get research from there.
Okay. Bye,
Yeah.
Maria.
Thank
Gracias.
you. Thank you for that research and for coming online.
So we have Silvina cannot unmute and cannot, but she has her question on the chat and she's asking,
Okay.
Shari, could you talk about your strategies to bring yourself to presence when you're feeling tired, stressed, or nervous?
Yes, it's a great question. I mean, I think that one of the things, I think mindfulness practice is helpful with this, but there's a lot of presence practices we have that are geared towards this. And, one very powerful one I find is music. And when I have a piece of music that I have listened to that particularly inspires or ignites a sense of presence in my own brain and body, and then I put that on, I listen to it a lot, but then before I walk into a session, putting that on, just that's where the repetition of practice is really important. My brain and body remember and bring me into that moment. I might do things like long exhalations, which is a polyvagal practice that ignites the ventral vagal nerve, which is has part of the social engagement system and so on, to be able to bring myself in. I have a personal mindfulness and self-compassion practice. I've had a personal practice since 1990. So, 30, coming on 34 years. So a daily practice in this way is really helpful, but definitely having some space between sessions, having some space where I bring myself into the moment, whether, that's why I encourage people to find their personal way, whether it's a Qigong practice or a mindfulness practice or long exhalation practice, or one of the practices that we lay out in the book, to come into the moment before entering in with the other. And that's where self-care is also really important, right? I mean, how am I looking at my whole larger life to say, where am I out of balance? And what is it that I need so that I can bring myself more fully in the moment with others? So there's a whole range of stuff that I like to offer. And then it's about, where's the personal one for you? I mean, for me, another one really, I said a little bit of it, but just being in nature. Being in nature to me is very uplifting and really helps me. And that might be it. Well, I can't always get out to the woods. It might be just, a tree in the street or on a park or something, to just let go of whatever I'm holding on to be able to show up fully with the person that I'm working with.
That's very useful.
Thank you so
much. And thank you, Silvina. Sad that you could not
much.
use your microphone. So we have a question by Carola Isabel Pires Gomez, and she's asking, what would be important in your point of view to consider when bringing therapeutic presence when working with complex PTSD clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where, polyvagal informed treatment is really important, and it helps with presence. Because one of the things I think is really important with people with complex PTSD and the level of trauma that they've experienced, often complex developmental trauma or otherwise, that they're in a constant state of unsafety, of potential, whether it's potential being triggered or whether it is, you know, their own experiences in relationships now. But I need to know my client's nervous system so that for example, if I know my client has complex PTSD and has a very sensitive nervous system, that even just me kind of looking down a little bit, maybe I'm looking down because I'm reflecting, or, I'm really hot and I reach for my window, that might be experience with someone who's got a very sensitive nervous system as an attack, or something like that, even though obviously it's a very safe relationship, I'm reaching for a window, but I know my client has this very sensitive nervous system. So how I move, how I gesture, how I validate those subtle difficulties in their nervous system and be able to be in dialogue with them. So, for example, when I say be in dialogue with them, I mean about what they need. So, for example, if I'm doing online, even in the room, I might be aware of my positioning. Like, does this feel too close to you? Is this feel too distant? Like, where's the right place where where you feel safe in connection with me? It might be being really attuned to when they are either triggered or more often shut down, just to a subtle look in the face, and being able to check in with them on what's being happened. So part of presence is about attuning to those kinds of subtleties that might happen with my client and in the relationship, so that I can be able to name what's happening and invite them back into whether it be some practice or even just look me in the eyes, let's breathe together, let's do long exhalations together. So being very attuned to clients' nervous systems is really important when working with complex PTSD.
Okay, thank you so much. And if somebody has one more question, we still have just one more question, or if not, we just go into the experiential. Okay.
Comment or a question, whatever
Yeah,
is.
you can comment or bring yourself out and say something. Yes, of course, you're very welcome. Okay, so this is your chance. Type something of your experience of this conversation so far before we go into the experience. Type one word of how you feel right now.
Something that touched you, or something that you knew already that just validated your own experience. Because we all know some of this.
Resonating.
Yeah. Enrique, I need you to be my translator here.
Yes, joyous, warmth, connection, gratitude, content, in symphony, connected, curious. Great.
So maybe what I'll do is
peacefulness,
wonderful.
Feeling good and connected. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Lovely to talk and listen about what's really important. Yeah. It made a lot of sense for me to prepare with silence for this, being in silence ready for the other. Thank you for you bring a lot of peace. Thank you. Open and connected. I love the presence of the Buddha behind you.
Setting up your room in a way that has things to be able to cultivate a sense of presence for yourself is also really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And the didgeridoo. Leaving all the training at the door and trust them by relational presence. Awesome. Yeah. A lot of wisdom in this group.
A lot of wisdom in this group. Well, what I'd like to do is to walk you through a pre-session practice that I do before many of my sessions. And it's based on the acronym of presence. So I'm going to walk us through it. Part of why I was thinking in this moment of which practice I want to do, because I have many to offer, was because it holds a lot of the components of presence and the relational presence. So I would love to invite us all into a practice. If you'd like to join in that, that's wonderful. And like any practices, if you don't want to, that's absolutely okay too. So holding the intention to practice for a moment, it'll just be about maybe 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes. Oh, yeah, I see people moving their body, getting into a comfortable position where you feel both connected and grounded, feet on the ground, both comfortable and alert at the same time. And if it feels right or comfortable for you, just allowing your eyes to close or look at the ground in front of you. And just allowing yourself to settle into the chair or the couch, the bed, wherever you are, just feeling it hold you up. You don't have to hold yourself up. And just pausing where you are, which is the first letter in the acronym presence. Just pause. Having the intention to pause. And then R is resting in relaxing into the body, perhaps doing a bit of a scan of your body just to notice from toe up your legs, to your torso, to your head, just noticing any tense spots and just relaxing them a little if that feels possible for you. And then E is expanding your awareness of your breath. Perhaps taking a few long exhalations, allowing your exhalation to be a little bit longer than your inhalation. And just noticing without changing anything, just coming back to natural breathing and just expanding your awareness to include your breathing, feeling the breath move through the center of your body, your chest rise and fall, or your belly rising and falling. And then S is about sensing your inner body. So just noticing in your physical and your emotional body what's true inside of me right now, just sensing into your body. Not trying to do anything with it or change it, just noticing, oh, there's a tightness in my chest or tingling in my fingers. Just sensing without judgment, just what's true in your inner body right now. I'm bringing a kind curiosity to whatever you notice. And then E is expanding your awareness outside of your body for a moment. So you may want to do that by opening your eyes or listening to sound in the room or just noticing what's around you and the space around you, noticing colors and shapes, bringing a curiosity to your outside awareness, your exteroception. Or even on the call, noticing these other beautiful people who are practicing with you together. We're just bringing a curiosity to what's around you, in the space around you. And that could be, again, visual, smells, sounds, the feel of the chair that you're on. And then moving to N, which is noticing the relationship between your inner and outer world. So you may close your eyes again to do this, whatever feels right. And just noticing the relationship between your inside world and the world around you. You know, you may have an image for that. For me, I notice a bridge connecting my inner world with my outer world. Whatever feels right for you, just noticing that connection between your inner world and the space around you. You could even be noticing your own body here, practicing a breathing, and the many bodies on this call that are doing the same, just feeling that connection between inner and outer world. And then C is for center and ground. So bringing your awareness back to your own sense of center, feeling your feet on the ground if they are there, or just feeling the center of your body, the breath moving through the center of your body, just recentering in yourself. And then the last D is to enter back into the virtual space or just welcoming yourself back to being here with each other. If you're in the therapy room, it might be the time to, welcome the client into the room. And as you re-enter and open your eyes, if they're not open, slowly, gently, as you re-enter to the virtual room, just allowing yourself to still stay connected to your breath and your inner world as you connect with each other again. So thank you for your practice. This is something you can do before walking in a room that just embodies both the connection to self, to others, the relationship between, before you formally invite your client into your physical or virtual space. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you. Enrique, I pass back to you. And if you'd like, if it feels right to you, feel free to, just as Enrique asked before, to say a word about the practice in the chat or anything you want to say about your experience in this moment. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, everyone. The first E was enhancing your awareness of your breath. I might have said expanding, enhancing, either or. Okay. And I can translate everything here, so you don't need to do that for me.
Consciousness,
I got it.
alignment, presence, authentic connection, home. Thank you for being generous. Love and gratitude. Thank you. What a gift. Compassion. Ready for my following clients. Great practice to do in between sessions.
Yeah, Silvina, you can see it it's in any of the books that I have. I'm trying to figure out if it's in any of the publication papers. But you would find it in any of the books.
Thank you. Connected. Perfect. So I want to thank you once more, Shari, and thank you, everybody. And I want to wish everybody have a great new year. And if you feel inside and outside that you want to participate, you'll still have a discount for the workshop. If you put the coupon PM25, it will give you 25% discount for being a professional member of this community. That's why PM. So you're a professional member and you practice with clients, and you are welcome to join us. And you have until Tuesday to do that, because we need to close registration. So I would want to welcome you over there in the workshop. If you are able and willing to do it, you'll be so welcome. And if not, we will miss you. And I look forward to meeting you, Shari, soon for our workshop together, and hope we continue. And I'm so loving this work.
Wonderful. Thank you. I look forward to it as well, Enrique, and everyone. Wish you a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I will post the recording in the next days, because the Spanish translation will be pasted on the video, and that's a work of my technician. I still don't know how to do that with the software without making a lot of mistakes, but the technician will help me do that. And then as soon as it's ready, it will be posted and sent to you for you to watch. Okay, thank you for joining, and have a good evening, good afternoon over there in the Canada and the
Yeah,
Americas.
thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Enrique. Bye, everyone.